Hello, welcome to the Digital Tabletop Festival. My name is Jupiter Hadley, and I'm going to be interviewing Steve Jackson, head of SJ Games, game design legend, creator of Munchkin, Car Wars, GURPS, Ogre, Illuminati, and many, many more.
Hi, Jupiter. Thank you.
You've created so many different games in your lifetime.
It's what I like doing, and I've been very fortunate to find an audience and find good help and be able to do it.
You've done an amazing job to do so. Sort of starting us off, what games and films and books, etc., have influenced your work over time?
Oh, games. Well, it would really be the games that I played starting when I got to college. And that was largely the old SPI war games, but there was a lot of risk.
And have those older games continued to inspire you, to make?
Oh yes, I still think about those, although I have a lot of new inspirations floating around as well. The role-playing games became popular after I left school, and I learned to play RPGs and learned that every game, even a board game, if it's good, has a role-playing element in it. So that was important. Mm-hmm. You asked about films, and I really can't think of any films that have made any difference to me in what I was doing. Books, lots and lots of books. I was a compulsive reader, elementary school, all through high school. Analog magazine in the 60s and 70s. I devoured every issue. So whatever the librarians would let me read out of the public library. So young adult stuff and some not so young adult. Just everything I could get. Big stacks of books.
It's good to hear about inspiration when it comes to creating games, because a lot of people take different inspirations from different areas. And sometimes players who play games don't realize how many other bits of media sort of feed into the creation of other media.
It's funny. There's a story about a young player who was playing cyberpunk games, and he was told, yes, you should really read Neuromancer. He wasn't much of a reader, but he went and started Neuromancer, and he came back saying, yeah, there's nothing new here. This is all just your basic cyberpunk tropes. And it was, dude, where do you think those came from?
Yeah, that's very, very true. It's quite interesting to hear that you had a lot of books and a lot of different forms of written media or what inspired your different games. Makes a lot of sense, though. As well as creating a bunch of libraries of games, you've got tons and tons of awards over the years. Origins Hall of Fame, tons of Origin Awards generally for many games, including Car Wars. You've got the Dice Tower for Ogre, etc. What award has meant the most to you over all of the awards that you've accumulated over the years?
Well, it's awesome to get awards. It means somebody liked what I'm doing. So, they're all neat. That first recognition for the Ogre miniatures meant a lot. If I had to give one answer, it would be the Hall of Fame, just because that's the big, all-encompassing award, and I was inducted into the hall at a very young age. But I thank everyone who's ever voted for me. It's neat.
Do you remember the first time you got an award?
That would have been were they calling it the Charles Roberts then? But it would have been the award for the Ogre miniatures line.
And what was it like, that experience?
Back in the late 70s. It was very, oh wow. And of course, the main recipients of the award were the sculptors at Martian Metals. But I helped.
Yeah. Thought there wouldn't have been anything to sculpt for. That's really interesting. got an award for YouTubing at one point and was just over the moon. It was just a small little thing. It was a community related award, and I remember that sort of like acknowledgement, I guess, or someone else saying that your work is very good. That can
Yes,
really motivate.
you know what it's like then. It means that you're not just shouting into the darkness.
It's a big form of recognition for all of your work. Before we dig into the game, in this current climate of conspiracy theories and fake news and intelligent operations aimed at disrupting the elections, primarily like in the US, it would seem appropriate to ask about the infamous incident of SJ Games being raided by the US Secret Service. Can we talk about that?
Sure, how many hours you got?
Plenty of time, don't worry.
Oh, I can try and hit the high points. First, Bruce Sterling, the science fiction author, wrote a nonfiction book about this raid and a couple of other incidents, and that's a very, very good source. The name of the book is The Hacker Crackdown, and it's a good read. There's also a lot of background material on our site. The essential story is that one of our U.S. phone companies, Bell South, got hacked by some kids who noticed the mainframe password was set to default. High security there. Mm-hmm. And they got in like walking through an open door, and to prove they'd been there, they made a copy of an instruction manual. The next thing you know, Bell is screaming to the FBI that they'd been hacked. And the FBI told them to run along and play. Mm-hmm. So they screamed to the Secret Service. And the Secret Service goes, "Where are the hackers? Where are the hackers?" And they eventually end up raiding the hackers and the hackers' friends, and at least one employer of a hacker's friend, and that would be me.
Wow.
Then they tried to make the copied file look valuable. They talked about 911 service. They talked about the cost of the Sun workstation it was written on. They didn't talk about the fact that they had that same item cataloged to sell for $14.
Of course not. That's not a detail that they need.
So when it finally got to court, the judge tore them a new one. The government did not have the facts on their side, and their case was poorly prepared. And through our modern lens of 2020, I think it probably helped that I was white and male.
Yeah.
I did not get much support from my fellow publishers, but I got a lot of support from the fans. And when it was over, we collected some damages. It was the 6 figures, actual damages, not the 8-figure stuff that people retire on. We hadn't gone for that. I don't want to retire. I want to be left alone to pay my taxes and make games. I can succeed if they'll let me alone to make games. And I've done that.
Yeah.
And a side note about the Secret Service, right now, those guys are heroes. Back then, remember, 40 years ago, some stupid, arrogant stuff got done by ignorant leaders and ignorant followers who were doing something besides their main mission, which is to guard our president. And now the Secret Service every day risks a deadly disease to guard this senile, ungrateful old man who won't even wear a mask. Those guys are heroes.
Yeah, times have definitely changed a lot for the world.
Yes.
In between this time and up to 2020. It's definitely a super interesting, like, once-of-a-lifetime story as well.
Oh, I hope it's once in a lifetime.
It's definitely something that would go viral nowadays and be all over everywhere if some kids were able to hack into something using a default password and cause this much trouble.
Well, they didn't cause trouble. It was the Bell South reaction that caused trouble. They took their little souvenir and left. They didn't change anything. They didn't break anything. They were just walking through an open door.
Just exploring somewhere.
Yep.
Mm.
They should not have been doing it. You don't walk through an open door that's not yours. But that was all they did.
Moving a bit on to the questions now, really.
Sure.
Given how much physical gaming and tabletop gaming relies on people being around each other, playing around a table or at stores or conventions or gaming clubs, how much has the COVID-19 pandemic impacted on your own work and SJ Games' work?
It's made big changes. We have a nice office that we can't use now.
Yeah.
When COVID got serious, we immediately started transitioning to a virtual company. We're learning how to do it now, and we'll never go all the way back. On the whole, a lot of games are being sold most months, especially evergreens. People who aren't playing games are asking their game playing friends what's good, and they get recommendations of top sellers and make the top sellers topper sellers. Kickstarter projects are doing well, especially from known companies, but it is a very, very rough time to be a game store, and we like game stores.
Of course. Do you think that game stores will still be able to come back from all of this?
Not all of them.
When I first moved to England, I was a part of a small games club that was ran by, it was almost like a ma and pa tabletop shop where the guy who ran it just got all of his favorite games and then sold them, and he knew everything about them all. And some of the best recommendations were in that shop.
Yes, that's the best place to go buy, is where the people hang out who are playing the games.
What are some of the things that you've implemented now because of COVID that you're not going to be ever taking away from your company or the way you work?
Well, right now, everyone works at home except for the guys in the warehouse, and we have adapted the spaces for them. So there are now 2 workstations, and 1 accounting employee is there more or less full time. Everybody else comes in only when they have to, and when they have to depends on their job. But we have a schedule so the building never gets anything like full. And as far as I know to date, there have been no cases among our staff.
Of course.
I have friends and relatives who have been infected, but nobody on the staff yet.
It's very good that that's a priority.
Yes, we can replace a month's income a lot easier than we can replace a staff member.
Of course. And do you think the amount of people that go into the building and work is going to stay the same after COVID? Do you think it works better? People working from home?
For some people, working from home is a lot better. The people who live 45 minutes or an hour away are saving a lot of time every day that they don't have to drive. We were already on 4-day weeks, just so people would have to drive a little bit less. But yes, I need to be in the office more than I am, but I don't need to be in every day.
Fair. And do you think more people are going to be using things like Tabletop Simulator and converting their games to digital forms?
I think that's happening, yes. There's a lot of development yet to do on the simulator games, both on the coding and on a proper understanding of the rights involved. But work is going on.
I quite like the option of having games digitally as well, because my family's in America and I live in England. So my brother quite likes tabletop games and I can still play with him and stuff. So it's been fun seeing more get adapted.
And you've probably seen that some of these simulator sites are offering for free games that you would have to pay for in the store.
That does come up, yeah.
Yeah, which sounds very well until you realize that the people who are making those games can no longer make a living if nobody's buying them anymore, which is why I say there has to be an understanding about the rights.
definitely got to be something where the actual people involved in the game are the ones putting them up.
Either that or the simulator companies have to start buying licenses.
Yeah, purchasing IPs. Speaking about games that I like to play, Munchkins is a game you've made, and Munchkin is a game you've made, and it's one of the first games that I actually was like recommended when I first started playing physical games, tabletop games.
Right.
Can you describe what the game is for those who haven't played it?
Well, it's a takeoff of hack and slash style D&D. It's a card game. It's best with 3 to 5 players. But the idea is that you're all going down in the dungeon together to kill monsters and take their stuff. You can't actually fight each other, but you can totally backstab each other and play cards to hurt the other players and try and steal kills and so on. And the object is just to get to level 10. And we tried our best to make all of the cards funny and to have them combine in funny ways.
They're absolutely hilarious. You've definitely done a good job on that.
And it's very solidly rooted in the role-playing game experience, but the game is going to be 20 years old next year. And as we developed it, the subject got broader, and now it's just all kinds of cultural comment.
Mm-hmm. You did say that it was rooted in the RPG experience, but where did the original idea come from for the game? There have been loads and loads of Munchkin expansions. I've seen so many different expansions of the game myself, so I can imagine there's just a plethora of them. But are there any that you're particularly proud of or particularly fond of?
I would say Munchkin Cthulhu and Munchkin Apocalypse come to mind because I like the themes on those, and because they have alternate victory conditions in them that make the game more interesting when you're experienced. And I like Munchkin Booty, the pirate game, because I can say, ah, and talk all piratey, me proud beauty, and so on and so on.
Expansions that have a sort of twist on the gameplay, I always find it more interesting, especially for people who play that game often.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's always good to have expansions that do that sort of thing. Another game that's a big part of gaming history is Ogre. For those who don't know about that game, can you give us a quick overview?
Sure. It's a war game, a game on a hex map. One side has one unit, and that's the Ogre. And it's a giant robot tank. And the other side has 20 or 30 assorted regular tanks and artillery and infantry squads. So the Ogre takes damage gradually on a record sheet. And every attack, the attacker decides where the damage will be aimed. And then a 6-sided die decides whether that attack hits, because most attacks on the Ogre just bounce off its armor. And then when the Ogre gets damaged, it has to decide how to adjust his tactics to best use his remaining assets. And then the Ogre's turn comes and he blows up a bunch of stuff. And then the game goes on. And the Ogre wins if he destroys the enemy's command post, which means he's trying to get from one end of the board to the other against the opposition of all of those little units. And it takes 30 or 45 minutes to play. It's a really fast game.
From a gameplay perspective, Ogre seems to use probability and the combining of probability through attacks to build the emerging tactics. How did you design this core mechanic, and how did it come about?
That's very much the influence of the SPI style of wargaming combined with lots and lots of playtesting, and literally hundreds of playtests.
So why do you think Ogre has continued to build a fan base decades after the first version was released?
Yes, many decades after. One reason is because it's fast and simple. One reason I think is that often people first played it when they were young, and now parents use it to introduce their kids to gaming because it's simple.
That makes a lot of sense. It's not just people liking cybernetic tanks then.
No, I think it would do about the same if the ogre were a real ogre and the defending units were archers and knights. I'd have to rewrite all the introductory fiction. But the important thing is that you've got this massive inhuman attacker on the one side and a lot of self-sacrificing defenders on the other side.
Going back to playtesting, how much playtesting did you do before the release of the first version of the game?
Of Ogre?
Yeah.
Tons, hundreds of games. That was my very first game, and I didn't know how much playtesting might be necessary, and I didn't have nearly as well developed a feel for what was working and what wasn't. So the substitute for that was to play it and play it and play it and play it and play it. And I learned a lot just by playing it over and over.
And looking back, is there anything you would have done different before the first release of your first game?
Oh, yeah. In spite of all that playtesting, there was one thing that got through that wasn't ideal that the players quickly picked out. And that was that one unit moved a little bit too fast for balance. So we changed that on the second edition.
Wow, so even stuff still got through all of that playtesting. It's always something.
Yes, you can't be perfect. You can do your best and you can be willing to fix it. And that's all you can do.
Car Wars is another classic game, yet one that's still very much speeding forward. What would be your pitch to people listening now about why they should check out Car Wars?
Oh, because it moves very fast and you get to blow a whole bunch of things up. And at the end, you're either victorious or you're spun out against the wall and dead, and you got closure either way. And if you like painting minis, Car Wars gives you a lot to work with. And if you don't like painting, you use the colored bases in your set. But it's just exactly what the name sounds like. It's cars with guns and armor, driving around trying to take each other out. It's a destruction derby with real destruction. That's
a good pitch line, a destruction derby with real destruction. It's a very good quote.
I guess it is. Making a note.
Put it on the boxes. There's a tweet noting that Car Wars universe timeline, whereby you're about to see a collapse in government, riots, etc. Just wondering what your takes are as a reflection on your own work in the actual world in 2020.
I do not want to live in the Car Wars world. Anything that pushes our world toward the Car Wars world, I dislike. Although the Car Wars world is better than the Ogre world.
2020 has been a bit of a weird world this year.
2020 has been bad enough without turning into Car Wars. Don't suggest it to anybody.
Car Wars recently did really well, as did Ogre and many of your other games, but on Kickstarter. While some might have thought that digital technology might have killed off physical gaming, that's definitely not what's happened. And through platforms like Kickstarter, physical games seem to have found a way to continue to grow and expand. How did Kickstarter fit into SJ Games' thinking?
It fit very well because it lets fans put their money where their mouth is early, and it gives us a guide to what people really want. We always try to listen to what the fans are asking for, but with Kickstarter, it's easier to gauge what people really want and when they're just talking, and it helps you screen out the cases where it seems like some idea is really popular, but it's just one guy posting under a bunch of different names about his obsession. We have never had a project fail on Kickstarter, but every one of them has teaching moments.
What are some of the big things that you've learned through Kickstarter?
Oh, let's see. We learn not to get so excited in the Kickstarter that we make promises that are hard to deliver.
Sounds like a good learning lesson there.
Yeah, we've never failed, but boy, we've been slow on some. And it's hard not to get caught up in the excitement when your fans are excited, but you need a plan. And you need a plan that goes even to where you have a whole lot of success. When we did our first Kickstarter, it was for Ogre, It got close to $1 million. It could have broken $1 million, but we said enough is enough. We've already got enough to keep us busy for years here. And we were written up in Money Magazine, and they said the only fault in our Kickstarter was that it did not have enough of a plan for success.
Was that harsh to read?
No, it was true.
Hmm.
Because we had not thought that it would get anywhere near $1 million.
Fair. Hadn't prepared for such a big success.
Right.
I wanted to touch on GURPS. Is that how you say it?
Yes.
The generic universal role-playing system.
Yes.
Your popular and long-running take on the pen and paper RPG system. Why did you go for a universal system as opposed to like D&D that opted to root in a fantasy setting?
Well, I had already designed a fantasy game that was Fantasy Trip, which was originally published by Metagaming, though we got it back.
Congratulations.
And I was playing a lot of Champions and playing some other special purpose role-playing games. And I thought that it would be interesting and probably useful to people if there was a rule set out there that was more general. That way you could use it for cross-genre gaming. Or you could take a character who was originally built in a fantasy world and take him into a science fiction world and see how he did, things like that.
Makes a lot of sense. RPGs seem to have undergone a renaissance with mainstream popularity as a hobby in recent years, as with Kickstarter. It seems technology such as Twitch and Discord is helping to drive that. What are your thoughts on this resurgence as a noted RPG designer?
I'm watching with huge interest. I'm not participating much, but maybe that'll change.
So you don't watch any Twitch streamers that do big campaigns with their audience?
No, it's too much like television, and I'm just not a television watcher.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, though.
Gives me a lot more time to write.
And to read as well, I would guess.
Yes. Only got so many hours in the day. Some have to be for sleep, and some have to be for building Lego.
But it's definitely interesting to see people doing campaigns from afar and being able to use things like Twitch and introduce them to their audiences and stuff in the same way that like video games have been for ages.
Everything that I read about it makes me think that it's a healthy and fun development. I just miss playing face-to-face is all.
That's fair. It's a bit of a different experience when it's face-to-face and like people you know quite well or you're getting to know. There's a lot more in-jokes and a lot more almost room for creativity sometimes when people are all together around a table. You're working across a range of genres, RPG, dice games, war games, card games. What makes you pick a strategy for a subgenre?
It's impulse.
It's impulse.
Oh yeah. I don't go to marketing meetings and decide we're going to do a subgenre about this and that and the other. My own designs are just based on what I'm interested in writing. And then we talk about my ideas, and the totally unmarketable ones don't go anywhere. But it starts off with an idea. It's always an idea.
Do you feel that passion, instead of looking at stats and looking at marketing, but having just like drive and passion is what helps your game stand out?
I think it might.
Definitely know when people are more passionate about something, it makes other people want to like feel passionate as well. So it's quite interesting that there's not a big strategy behind it or anything, despite it obviously being quite a big part of your job.
Oh, yeah.
You mentioned that.
Oh, sorry, go on.
No, you can go. That's fine.
No, I was just saying the games all start off with, I'd really like to do a game about thus and so.
It's a very good way to have a company. You mentioned that Munchkins is celebrating its 20th anniversary next year. Have you got anything planned for the anniversary?
We've done a lot of talking about that, but other than yes, the anniversary will definitely be celebrated, I can't reveal anything. You can certainly expect some t-shirts.
Okay.
But that's not all.
But that's not all. Just wait, there's more. That's definitely a huge milestone, so big congratulations on that.
Very few hobby games make it anywhere near 24 years. 20 years.
And many that have been around that long definitely aren't like household names and in everyone's collections.
Although some of them should be. There's some really fine games out there that just need more marketing.
Well, that kind of leads us into our next question. What are some classic games that you've not designed, but that you'd recommend other people would play and have in their collections?
If people haven't played Risk and Axis and Allies, which really date back to before hobby gaming as such, then those are good games that they should get to know enough so they can talk about it.
Okay.
Settlers of Catan. If you can't talk about Settlers of Catan, you don't really know gaming yet. A couple of other Euros are really, really good. Magic the Gathering. Everybody should have an idea of what's going on with Magic.
Can you give us a quick description of some of those games for those who hadn't heard of them?
Well, let's see. Axis and Allies is a board game set in World War II. Risk is a very abstract game about a war over the entire world. Settlers of Catan is a non-combat game about settling an uninhabited island. Magic the Gathering was the first popular collectible card game, and it's hard to say in one sentence what Magic is about. The skin of Magic is about casting spells to defeat your opponent, but it's really a highly complex mathematical exercise that is presented simply enough that people can handle
it. That's a very good description of Magic. The noting on that it is a complex game, but done in a simple and pure form.
First edition was less simple and pure, and people jumped all over it anyway. They've had a long time to work on that. That's definitely a household name.
Definitely is. I don't know anyone who hasn't heard of Magic or hasn't seen people playing Magic in shop windows and at tournaments.
Right.
What games are you currently playing?
None. There's nobody to play with. The answer to the question, the way you meant it, was Terraforming Mars. I really like that game. Century is a very fine abstract game.
Okay. Are you one of those people that get like all of the little, they're not like expansions, but they're little add-ons? I've played some versions of Terraforming Mars that people have created like 3D models of all of the tiles and all these different add-ons, and I know some tabletop games have all of those created. Do you like those sorts of things? Do you like pure games?
I like that sort of thing, but if I did it for everything in my collection or even everything that I like, I'd need twice as much space. So if somebody wants to play with a set that has all that stuff in it, I will say yes, 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 but I don't have it. I paint miniatures, but not very well.
That's relatable. I paint miniatures, but also not very well. I've not collected a bunch of those little add-ons, but I just find them quite interesting, seeing them change sort of tabletop games, change the basic boards around. SJ Games has a really big, loyal community. What's the secret to building that sort of fan base?
Be loyal to them.
Be loyal to them. It's a very interesting, simple look at it. Just be loyal to your fans and they'll follow?
Yep.
How do you connect with your fans and gain all of their sort of feedback and opinions? Is it mainly through like Kickstarters or?
Well, before the internet, there were magazines.
Yep.
The communication was slower, but it was real. And I went to a lot of conventions. And I've seen game conventions change so much over the years for the better. And then the internet came along, and we jumped all over it like a starving man on a bottle of water. Because now the communications could be instant. And it just gets better and better. Now we've got Discord. Great way to meet other people and talk to them. I liked chat rooms back in the days of Moos and Muds, and Discord has most of those features and a lot more.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any advice for people who'd be trying to build a fan base around their tabletop game?
Set up a Discord, set up a chat room, talk to people, listen to what they say, but don't necessarily do all of it, because sometimes they're wrong.
Sometimes feedback is bad feedback.
Talk to your fans. Just give value for value. If you make a mistake, publish errata. Just be the kind of game company you want to deal with.
And being approachable, I guess, is part of that, because a lot of what you've said makes you and your games company quite approachable and easy to almost go and give that feedback to and talk to.
That's what we want.
Where do you see physical gaming going post-COVID over the next few years?
Assuming there is a post-COVID.
Yeah, assuming there is a post-COVID. Fingers crossed there is a post-COVID and we all get out of this.
I think the first thing we see will be a renaissance where everyone can go out and see each other again, and people will be going out all night and doing the things that they couldn't do. Going to concerts, playing games.
Do you think that that'll be great for the physical gaming community? More sales will be? I think it will be. Everyone's seeing each other.
Those stores that have managed to stay alive, yes.
I think
we see a new phenomenon more in the past few years, gaming cafes, and I hope that catches on.
There's a couple of board game specific cafes here, like in London, and they've been some of the best places to hang out because it's so different from just going to a regular cafe. You don't have to go. You don't have to go with a bunch of people. You can often find people to play with and people to hang out with.
Yes.
And friends to be made in a completely different format than you normally get.
Yes. It's like one of those bars that's such a specialty that you're likely to find friends there.
Yeah. And it's a good community, the people that play games as well. They're all quite welcoming and nice.
Overall, that's true. There are some exceptions, and
of course.
Ugh.
Do you get pitched games to publish a lot?
I do.
What are your advice for budding game designers who want to pitch towards you for publishing?
Don't.
Don't.
No. I have more ideas than I can keep track of myself. I have a staff. They have ideas too. If you have an idea that you're really passionate about, then unless it's something that just absolutely dovetails with what I'm doing. I mean, if it's a fantasy trip adventure, yeah, I'm the one who should publish fantasy trip adventures. But if you've got a really new original idea, they should be asking me how to develop it themselves and take it to Kickstarter themselves. And I'll tell them. So
you said that they should ask you how they can get their game ready to then bring it to Kickstarter.
Yes.
Do you think that Kickstarter, having your game sort of self-published through the backing of Kickstarter, has replaced more of going to an actual, not necessarily you, but an actual publisher or a distributor?
Yes.
I buy most of my games from Kickstarter nowadays, to be completely honest.
How many of the ones you buy do you play?
I play all of them. We have a tabletop group that comes over, and we play everything at least once with the tabletop group. And then we've got some of our favorites. We've got some that we always go back to. We've got lots of short games that are in between games when we're making food. Because our tabletop group is like a food group as well. We're actually doing one tonight because it fits within the rule of sixes, so it's allowed.
Cool. And what is the rule of sixes? Is that British law?
It's a COVID thing. So in the UK, you're allowed to meet up with 6 people in total, as long as your house is very well ventilated, and it's 6 people from 2 households, like 2 other households and yourself.
Okay.
Total. So you're allowed to meet up. And what we do is we have a big sort of dinner where everyone brings, one person brings a dessert, one person brings a side, and one person brings a main. And we have a dinner, and then we play a bunch of board games until midnight, and then some stragglers go off and leave, and we play a little bit longer.
That sounds fun. Do you wear masks?
We do some of the time. We didn't before COVID, obviously, and we were a bit bigger before COVID as well as a group. But we've limited it down, and we do spread out quite a bit and sanitize and everything. And we're all within each other's like bubbles that you're allowed.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, good luck to you. That's keeping it alive.
yeah, it's quite complex, but we very much when the COVID restrictions started to ease, we came back and started doing our group again. But as they're getting tightened again, it's probably not something that's going to last longer. But I definitely do try to play through all of my games. I do have a backlog, I should say, of quite a few games that I haven't quite played, but we'll get there someday.
Okay.
Which part of the game design process is the most fun for you, and which part's the least fun?
Oh, the most fun for me is at the first or second draft when I just get to write new ideas and play games in my head. Sometimes that's actually more fun than physically playing the game. Although part of the process of physically trying to play the game is trying to recapture all the fun I was having in my head.
Oh.
The least fun would be when I have to edit other people's writing.
That's a fair comment. What don't you like about editing other people's writing specifically?
When when it's a hard edit, when it's badly written.
Mm-hmm. Does that happen often?
It just pains me to see bad sentences. It happens oftener than it should.
Definitely doesn't sound like a very fun bit.
No, but it's part of the deal. I don't touch everything that leaves our company, but I touch an awful lot of it before it goes out.
So the same question for running a games company. What are the best parts and what are the worst parts?
Oh, I would say the best parts might be going to conventions and getting to do a game about whatever I want within reason and seeing my ideas turn into actual physical games. And the worst part would be sitting in meetings listening to why the pallets aren't going to arrive this week.
That's definitely a side of the sort of business that you don't really think about when you think about things you're going to get to do when you're designing board games. You've mentioned Kickstarter as a technology that has sort of changed board gaming over time. What other technologies do you think might change things, like augmented reality, 3D printing?
Both those are already making changes. There are augmented reality games already out there. I mean, that's what chasing Pokemon on your phone is augmented reality. Now, none of those games is our kind of game yet. None of them is a complex simulation, but that's certainly going to happen. What was the other one that you asked about? 3D printing. That is already making a big mark. People are already playing with 3D printed miniatures. And in time, it's going to have to make a change in people's business models because companies that do miniatures will have to either design miniatures that can't be ripped off by 3D or quit molding 3D and just sell the designs. And that's going to put a lot of people out of work.
It's definitely a big thing to consider when it comes to future technologies, is how much of it's going to be used to sort of rip off other games or to put people out of work.
Yes. Well, and every technological change puts people out of work. You just have to try to keep adapting.
My final question for you is, what is next for SJ Games going forward?
Well, Car Wars is getting closer and closer to release. That is something that has been in progress for years and years and years. It's been a slow development process as we tried to get everything right. And then we had some interesting adventures with the factories getting the model cars absolutely right. So Car Wars is coming soon. What else? The game Whiz War is about to go to print. Have you heard of WizWar?
I've not. Tell me about WizWar.
An old classic game. It's for 2 to 6 players, and you represent wizards down in a stone labyrinth trying to knock each other off and steal each other's treasures. And this would be the 9th edition of WizWar. It's been around for a long time, and it's a great game. It deserves to be super popular, and I'm hoping we can make it popular.
Wonderful.
That's one. I almost spoke up when you were talking about games that have been around a long time but might not be so well known. That's one that deserves to be well known. And I'm spending most of my time working on writing and editing things for the Fantasy Trip, which is the first role-playing game that I ever did, and as the name says, it's fantasy.
Sounds like you definitely have a lot of different gears in motion then.
Oh, yeah.
That's all I have for you, though. Thank you so much for being here on the internet, I suppose, and letting me interview you.
Thank you for having me.
You've got so much experience and knowledge. It's just really great to hear all about everything, really.
Well, I like sharing, so everybody wins.
Just so everyone's aware, there's information in the links below so you can check out more. Bye!
Bye-bye!